Holden out, please. Matters that we need to take up before we bring jurors in.
Your Honor, the next witness is also under the age of 18. So, I know we only spoke about this with regards to J.T. Taylor, but I would ask that that the camera remain off for the next witness, and he'll be our first witness this morning.
That'll be fine. That's consistent with the general rules. Anything from the defense?
Tanya Allen and Jeremy Taylor under oath would tell the truth and all of the evidence.
All right, so noted. We have all the jurors. Let's bring jurors in, please.
Steinberg with the Wake County Sheriff's Department.
Sir, if you would, place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Lyman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir. If you would, please just introduce yourself to the jury, if you'll tell them how you're employed.
Yes, sir. My name is Mark Scheinberg. I am a sergeant with the Wake County Sheriff's Office.
Okay, and Sergeant Steinberg, how long have you been employed with the Wake County Sheriff's Office?
I've been with the Wake County Sheriff's Office since August of 2004, so a little over 12 years.
And when did you become a sergeant?
I became a sergeant actually January 15th or January 16th of this year.
Okay, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Prior to your promotion to sergeant, how were you assigned in the Sheriff's Department?
Yes, sir. Since May of 2011 until January 15th of 2017, I was an investigator with the agency.
Okay. And as an investigator with the Sheriff's Department, are you assigned to a particular division or group, and what types of crimes did you investigate?
Yes, sir. I investigated crimes from break-ins, larcenies, to major crimes to include homicides, also juvenile offenses, and I worked in the financial crimes, the fraud unit as well.
Okay, so you essentially would investigate any type of crime, particularly felonies?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, investigator, were you working in your capacity as an investigator with the Sheriff's Department on the evening of April 9th, 2014?
Yes, sir, I was.
All right, and can you tell me if you had the opportunity to respond to 1125 Lake Glad Road in Wendell?
I did.
And how did you come to receive that call or to arrive on that scene?
On that day, I was working on call, and when you work on call, you work in the evenings, and if there's any major crime that occurs as an investigator, we also respond to the scene to assist the deputies there. So I had heard a call on the radio come out, and I began to respond to the scene.
All right. And what type of car would you have been driving that night? Is it a marked patrol car or is it something else?
It was an unmarked patrol car. At that time, I was driving a black Chevrolet Impala.
Okay. So investigator, you go to Lake Glad Road, and did you know what the nature of the call was before you arrived?
Yes, sir, I did. When they call came out on the radio, it came out as a shooting.
But at that point, you didn't know the status of the victims. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And did you yourself have a suspect name when you arrived?
I had heard a name on the radio. However, when I arrived on scene, I got out and I was going to talk to one of the deputies on scene to see if we can get more information to assist.
Sure. And I believe you've already heard some of the other deputies testify. You were not the first on scene, is that correct?
No, sir, I was not.
Okay, and there were a number of marked patrol cars and maybe even EMS and fire there by the time you arrived?
Yes, sir, there was.
Well, so did you pull up sort of into the driveway there at Lake Glad, and who did you go speak with first?
I pulled up into the driveway and I met a deputy that was there. As I walked up, he had informed me that there was a young man there that I might want to speak to.
Do you recall which deputy that was?
I do not specifically recall who that was, but I believe it was Deputy Shapcott.
Okay. All right. And Deputy Shapcott already testified. He was one of the first responders there.
Yes, sir.
And did he direct you to a young man that you were that may be of interest in this investigation?
Yes, sir. He introduced me to a young man by the name of Jeremy, who also went by the name of JT.
Okay. And where was JT when you first came into contact with him?
We were in the driveway, and then we walked back to my vehicle after I was introduced to him.
All right. And you introduced yourself to JT. Did you kind of tell him who you were and what was happening at this point?
Yes, sir, I did. I introduced myself. I informed him I was an investigator with the agency, and I just wanted to talk to him to see what we could do to help.
All right. And so the first thing you do is just kind of get his demographic information, his name, and other things like that?
Yes, sir.
And what's the first thing you ask after you talk to him about that?
I just asked him if he knew who had committed this offense tonight, who had committed the shooting.
And what did he say?
He said that it was his father, Nathan Holden.
Okay.
For the rest of the last request for the instruction for testimony, if you would like.
All right, again, ladies and gentlemen, you're to consider the statements made by a witness who has previously testified that are being repeated by this witness solely for the purposes of corroboration or impeachment, not for the truth of the matter asserted.
Investigator Scheinberg, after he gave you the name of the defendant, did he then just kind of start to tell you about what had happened that evening?
Yes, sir. I asked him what time they had arrived at the house first, and he told me it was around 9 o'clock is what he thought.
All right. And then what did he tell you about when they got there?
He said once they got there that that he went into the house first, and that afterwards his father followed him in shortly thereafter.
And did he give you a further explanation about sort of what had been going on with the family leading up to this?
He did. He explained that there was some court stuff going on.
And did he did he tell you about siblings or other people that might have been present?
He did. He also said that he had two sisters, one of which was 9 years old and the other one which was 8 at the time.
Did you try to get a timeline from him in terms of how long it from the time of the event to the time law enforcement showed up there?
Yes, sir. I had asked him, and he said it took about 10 or 15 minutes before law enforcement had shown up.
And did he offer up any information to you about sort of where he was when the crimes occurred?
He did. He told me that he was hiding in the closet at the time of the shooting.
What did what else did he say about the events there?
He said while he was in the closet, he was also in there with his sisters when his father had shot his family.
At this point, to your knowledge, the suspect had not been taken into custody. Is that correct?
Correct. We were just trying to gather information and find out where the suspect was and to find out what had occurred at the same time, trying to figure out what we had at that point and what we needed to do next.
Sure. And as part of your, I guess, role as an investigator at that point, to try and develop a description of the suspect.
Yes, sir. We're trying to develop a description so we could disseminate it to the officers over the radio because they were actively searching for the suspect at that time.
And was JT able to provide you with any information about
He was.
clothing or description?
I apologize. Yes, sir. He was. He was able to give me a clothing description.
Okay. And what did he tell you?
He had told me that his father was wearing black Levi's, black boots, a red do-rag with a 49ers hat. And he said that he also had a black handgun.
Now, again, this conversation happens approximately 30 minutes after the shooting occurs. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And can you kind of describe the scene out there in front of the house at Lake Ladder Road?
Yes, sir. There were several marked and unmarked patrol vehicles. There was also at that point, I believe, JT became concerned that the news media had arrived as well, and several members of Mr. Holden's family had arrived as well that were concerned about what was going on.
Okay. And were people attempting to speak with you and with JT at that point?
Yes, sir. As I was talking to him in the vehicle, I had I had one supervisor come up to me and also some family members that had come up to me, and JT's phone had rang as well while we were having a conversation about what was going on.
So how would you characterize just generally the scene there at the crime?
It was busy. Busy would be a good word.
And were there several distractions there?
Yes, sir. There were several distractions.
And again, you only have a suspect description and an identity, but there's a lot more investigation that needs to be done in terms of figuring out exactly people's involvement in the case, things of that nature. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so, did you, you've now identified JT as an eyewitness to the event. So, did you? What decision did you make in regards to him at that point?
At that point, due to a lot of family members showing up at the scene, having a lot going on, we decided to have JT and his sisters go down to the to the sheriff's office, where it was more secure and quieter for them as well.
Sure. And so they were transported downtown to the sheriff's office. Now, is that at the public safety center right next door?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And once you got there, or once they were transported there, was it you that went back and actually followed up with JT and conducted a more extensive interview?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. And I guess that was done in the interview room. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We were in an interview room.
Well, tell me about how that interview went and how you began it with JT.
I began it with just going back over the things that we talked about on the side of the road, and then from there I began to ask him. He had a cell phone, and he just drew a pattern of his cell phone to unlock it so that the other investigators can use that for that reason, just to open it up.
I see. And he consented to y'all taking the cell phone and unlocking it for your investigation?
Yes, sir, he did.
All right. And again, you at this point, you go back and start all over, is that right, in terms of getting his personal information and his cell phone number?
Yes, sir.
And then, do you then go back and start speaking with him about what had transpired over the entire course of that day?
Yes, sir. We began to discuss, and I asked him if we could start a little earlier in the day and kind of see how his day went and how it started, and he began to explain to me how his day was.
And what information did he give you at that point?
At that point, he said that he went to school that day, and after school, his father picked him up in carpool.
Did he give you an approximate time?
He did. He said it was around 2:20 p.m.
And did he talk to you about any conversations they might have had?
I had asked him if he spoke to his father about anything particular after school, and he just said that they didn't, and they just went to his grandfather's house.
Okay. And was he able to describe for you where that is?
He had a difficult time giving an address, but he said it was somewhere in Roseville, and we were able to figure out that it was in Daniel's Mobile Home Park.
And did he tell you what he did when they got to his grandfather's house?
He did. He said they just went there, and he went there. He hung out, is what he said.
Okay. And did he tell you kind of how long they stayed at that residence?
He did. He said that they had stayed there till about 5 p.m.
And then what did he tell you happened next?
He said that after that they went to the Sonic in Roseville where he got something to eat.
And then at some point, did you ever leave the room during these interviews?
Yes, sir. At some point I did. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Did you receive some, I guess, different information about kind of the time frame of that day?
I did. Afterwards, we had discussed, he said prior to going to the Sonic that they went to go visit his family on Riley Hill Road, and he went to go spend some time with other family members.
And he mentioned, I believe, a cousin, is that right?
He did. He mentioned that he went to his cousin's house, and his cousin's name was Jason.
Okay. And then what did you say they did after going to the cousin's house?
He said afterwards, then they went to the Sonic, which was around 8 p.m. is what he believed.
Okay. And he said that was after being at the cousin's house for about 2 hours?
Yes, sir.
What did he tell you happened after they left the Sonic?
He said after they left the Sonic, his father asked him if he wanted to go see his mother.
All right. And did he tell you about whether or not he gave an answer to his father's question?
He said he didn't answer, but he believed that his father thought he said yes.
Okay. And then did he say what time they got to the grandmother's house?
He did.
Grandmother's house?
He said he believed they got there around 9 p.m.
Did you ask him about any other conversations he might have heard his father having on the phone or anything else?
I did. I asked him if his father had called anybody, and he says that he did not. And
did he give you more detail about where they parked when they got on the scene?
He did. He said when they arrived at his grandparents' house that his father parked behind his mother's silver car.
And then did he talk to you about exiting the vehicle and who entered the house first and things of that nature?
Yes, sir, he did. He said he exited the vehicle first.
Okay. Did you ask him about why he thought that they were going to the house?
I did. I asked him if he had talked to his father about anything on the ride there, and he said that they had not. He just thought he was just going to see his mother.
All right. And of course, you know, at this point, you weren't aware of any birthday party or the custody issues that may have been in play, or were you?
No, sir, I wasn't aware of any of that.
You're just taking Jeremy's statement and getting the timeline of the events of that night to
Yes,
gather
sir.
whatever evidence you can.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Give me just a moment. And did he tell you about what happened when he entered the residence?
He did. He said his grandfather had opened the door and made a comment to him when he walked up.
Okay, what did he tell you what the comment was?
He did. He said his grandfather asked him why his pants were sagging.
And did he tell you where he went once he got in the house?
Yes, sir, he did. He said he went back to his mother's room and he explained where that was.
Okay, and he kind of explained that it was to the back right of the house.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, what did he tell you he heard or saw next?
He said he had heard his father shoot his grandfather, and then he said that next thing he heard was his grandfather running.
Was he able to tell you if he heard anything in terms of an argument or anything like that?
He said he didn't recall any exchange of words between his grandfather or his father.
Did he tell you how long it took his father to follow him into the house?
He said that it took him about a minute.
Okay. And did you ask him about a gun?
I did. I asked him if he if he saw his father with the gun at any point, and he said he did not.
Did you ask him about his father's demeanor on the way over to the house where the shooting occurred?
I did.
What did he tell you?
He told me that his father was not angry or quiet.
Okay. And again, he told you you heard the gunshot. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what did he tell you? He understood. You know, in terms of if he knew who was shooting, who was being shot at, that type of thing.
Yes, sir. He had made a statement saying that he was shooting at him.
And did you have him clarify that?
I did. I asked a clarifying statement as to who he was and who he meant by when he said him.
And how did he clarify that for you?
He said he believed the he was his father and the him was his grandfather. So he believed his father was shooting at his grandfather.
And then did he tell you if he heard anything else kind of out in the main part of the house?
He did. He said he heard his father go into his grandmother's room after that.
Did you press him at all about if he heard any exchange of words or what he might have heard said out in the main part of the house?
I asked him if there were any exchange of words between a grandfather and his dad, and he says there were not. However, he does recall his father speaking to his grandmother.
And did you take down what he heard him say?
I did, yes, sir.
Objection, this one beyond the scope of court.
Overruled. I'm going to allow it.
Go ahead.
He had said that he heard his father say, "Y'all can't talk to me. Y'all can't talk to me."
Did he explain that statement?
He did. He said he didn't understand why they couldn't talk to him, and he believed it was about, and he believed it was because of how his father was.
Overruled.
At that point, did you talk to him a little bit about the family history?
I did.
And why'd you do that?
I just wanted to get a basis as to the family because I didn't know any family history prior to this.
Okay. And what did he tell you about that history?
He had said that his grandparents had never cared for his father and that they just didn't get along.
Okay. And after kind of explaining that to you, did he continue to talk about the events of April 9th?
He did.
And what did he say about his grandmother at that point?
He had said that his grandmother just yelled and that he heard some more gunshots right after that.
Well, after that, did he tell you what his mom did?
He did. He said his mother had called the police and then his dad had come into the room.
Right. And did he tell you what he did next?
He did. He said that they went into the next room, and he then, I believe, went into the closet.
Can he tell you what he heard from the closet?
Yes, sir. He said that he heard his mother yelling and screaming at his father, and he had heard his mother to continue to yell, "Stop! Stop! Stop! I'm sorry! I'm sorry! I'm sorry! I couldn't talk to you."
And what did he tell you he heard next?
He said, well, at this point he was in the closet and he heard a gunshot and his father punch her.
And did he kind of describe the punching sound?
He did. He made a motion as to punching, and he said it just sounded like a punching noise.
And what did he tell you happened next?
He said that the noise that he had heard, it just sounded like it was back to back.
And what did he tell you happened next?
He said after that his father had come to them in the closet, and that he had given them a hug, told them that he loved them, and his father had called 911.
All right, and then what did he report that his father did next?
He said his father then put the phone down and then left.
Did you ask him about how he knew, or how the defendant knew they were in the closet?
Yes, sir, I did, and he had told me it was because it was right next to where the incident occurred. That the closet was right next to where his mother was.
All right. Now, did JT tell you that he saw a little bit of what happened?
He did. I asked him if he had saw anything, and he had hesitated, and then eventually he told me he had saw the punching part.
Okay. And did he hesitate after that and then give you any more information?
He did, and then he had also said he had saw the gunshot.
And he told you that after after the defendant had called 911 and put the phone on the dresser, did he tell you what he started to do?
He did. He said after his father left, he started to cry, and then he was speaking to the 911 lady, as he called her, and she was asking him a lot of questions, but at that point he didn't want to talk to anybody.
Sure. Well, did you ask him what he saw after he got out of the closet?
I did.
What did he tell you?
He told me I saw my mother's body full of blood on her body and that she couldn't breathe. And then he began to mimic and show me how she was attempting to breathe in a shallow manner.
Okay. And what else did he describe about the scene at that point?
He also described that his sisters were crying and yelling.
Did he tell you how long it took the police to arrive?
He did. He said it took about 10 or 15 minutes.
And can he tell you what happened when they got there?
He did. He said he had heard some banging on the doors, and he heard some banging noise on the door, and then he knew that it was the police.
And did he tell you about sort of what he was doing in between the time he called 911 and the time the police arrived?
Yes, sir, he did. He said he stayed in the room with his mother.
And did he tell you what he told the police when they got there?
He did. He told me he told the police that his to go in the back where his grandfather was located, and at that point he had exited the house with his sisters.
Now, at this point, did you kind of circle back and try and get some more information for your investigation?
I did. At this point, I was trying to get some information about the weapon since our officers were still looking for the suspect.
All right. And so did you speak with him about the defendant's gun?
I did.
Can you tell me about that part of the conversation?
Yes, sir, I did. I had asked him if he had seen the gun before, and he said he had.
And what did he tell you about when he had seen it?
He said he had seen the weapon before, and his father had, because his father had shot at a dog that was, as he said, messing with the garbage outside.
And did you then talk to him about, whether or not he had had any conversations with the defendant about this situation?
Can you repeat that?
Did you talk to JT about whether or not his dad had talked to him about, shooting the grandparents or shooting the mom?
Well, he had brought up the fact that his father and mother had some issues in court, and that there was that part of this, he recalled a different situation with his father.
Okay. And next, did you kind of ask him about family in the area or friends or places his dad might go?
I did. I was asking for two reasons. One, to see where his father may have gone, and to see if he had other family, because we had a concern about placement with the children as to where they can go that night.
Right. And again, you're at the time you're conducting this interview. Are you aware of LaTanya Holden's condition, or?
All I was aware of at that point is that one ambulance had left the scene with her in it,
Okay.
and that's all I knew.
But you didn't know a prognosis yet, or
No.
potential for recovery, or
No, sir. I wasn't
whether
aware.
or not she would even survive.
That's correct.
You continued to try and gather some information from JT about kind of talking to the defendant right after the final shooting, the shooting of LaTanya. Can you tell me about that portion of the conversation?
Yes, sir. I asked him what he thought, what his father looked like when he came to him when he opened the closet door.
And what did he tell you about that?
At first, he said he didn't remember, but then after that, he said his father looked calm and upset, and that he was angry upset, is what he said.
And did he report to you how he himself was feeling at that point?
Yeah, at that point, I was trying to check in with him and see how he was doing, and he said that he just felt numb.
Did y'all talk at all about the conditions of his grandparents or his mom?
I never specifically mentioned anything about his grandparents. The only thing I had told him was that I knew one ambulance had left the house at that point.
And you informed him that she was actually at the hospital at that time?
Yes, sir.
Did you ask him if while he was in the house he went to go see his grandparents?
I did.
What did he say?
He replied that he did not, that he did not.
And I guess you may have asked him if he heard anything in the house after the shooting, or I guess before the shootings occurred or while it was happening. And what did he tell you?
Correct. While I was asking him about his grandparents, if he went to see him, he said the only thing he recalled was that he heard his mother saying over and over that, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry."
And could he tell you whom she was saying that to?
Yes, sir. He said it was in the direction of his father.
And you again asked him if he had spoken to his father about this occurring.
Correct.
And what did he say?
He said they did not.
And again, at this point, is it fair to say you're trying to figure out what anyone's involvement might have been in this case?
Yes, sir.
And after speaking with Jeremy, you're satisfied he had no involvement in this?
Yes, sir.
Did you speak with him, I guess, more generally about his parents' separation?
I did. I began to ask him about his father and some discipline and what it was like living with his dad, just trying to get an understanding.
Because in the earlier part of the interview, you've at least learned that Jeremy said that there was some custody stuff going on. Is that right?
Yes, sir. As he explained it, court stuff.
Court stuff. Okay. And so what information was he able to give you about both the breakup and the and the issues he had with his father?
He had mentioned that his parents had separated around Christmas the year before, and that his mother had left.
Okay. And did he sort of describe the defendant to you about how he was about discipline and rules?
Yes, sir. He said his father was stern and that his dad had a lot of rules, and he would just, when he would get upset and yell.
Did he say something about his father's opinion of people disobeying him?
He did. He said his father did not like people disobeying him.
Did you at this point did you kind of talk to JT about where he was going to stay sort of that evening, because that was kind of a immediate concern, wasn't it?
Yes, sir, it was. I had discussed with him that CPS was there. They had were trying to find somebody appropriate for him and his sisters to stay with that night.
And to your knowledge, that placement was done, and they went into the care of Child Protective Services that evening.
Yes, sir.
Now, at some point, did you kind of go back into the interview room after you completed the initial interview with him and ask a follow-up question or two?
I did, yes, sir.
Okay, and why was that?
I had also spoken with, I spoke to one of his sisters.
And was there a gap in the timeline or something that maybe JT had not mentioned to you originally in the timeline?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to get some clarity on that.
Okay, and so when you reapproached him, what did you ask him about?
I had asked him if they had stopped anywhere else and if they had stopped at a church.
And what did he say when you asked him about that?
He said they did, and they had stopped at Mount Zion Church.
Okay. And you followed up with him again upon hearing that about his father's demeanor, and what did he say?
He said his father was calm.
And did he tell you sort of who was at the church earlier in that evening?
Yes, sir. He said he saw his sisters there.
And that was after speaking to one of the sisters. They were also down there and had to be interviewed as a part of the investigation.
Yes, sir. They were down there. We were just keeping them there safe.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
And you're conducting the criminal investigation, but at the same time, sort of have an emergency custody situation on your hands as well.
Yes, sir. And CPS was handling that part separate. Mm-hmm.
All right. What was? How did you find JT to be during your interaction with him? I guess over several hours.
He was very polite. He was cooperative. When I asked a question, he answered it directly.
Okay. All right. And after taking the statement from JT, there are other investigators there that and maybe captains and majors in the department. Do you all consult together after speaking to JT?
Yes, sir. Just so we can all find out what information everybody has and try to help one another out and connect any pieces that may be missing.
Sure. And after after y'all kind of shared your information, was a charging decision made?
Yes, sir, it was.
And did you actually go and swear out those warrants to the magistrate?
Yes, sir, I did.
Now, Investigator Schomburg, did you also have an opportunity to assist Investigator Blackwell in taking the defendant into custody?
I did not take him into custody. However, once he was brought down to the sheriff's office, he was apprehended at a different location. I was already down there.
I see.
And I assisted in the initial interview and then processing him down at the jail.
Okay, so you just assisted in the processing, and that means taking fingerprints and photographs and basically booking the
Yes, sir.
the defendant. You didn't have any conversation with him yourself, though, is that correct?
With Mr. Holden?
Right.
No, sir, I did not.
All right. Thank you, Investigator. Anything further?
Yes, sir.
Cross-examination.
Yes, sir. When you talked with JT, he never said anything about his dad picking up a package in the woods, did he?
No, sir, he did not.
Okay, and you would have noted that if he had.
Yes, sir, I would have.
He said that the order of events when he first talked to him was that they had gone to Cousin Jason's house first,
I believe he first said that they went to his grandfather's house first.
and then after that went to Cousin Jason's.
Yes, sir.
Then he went to the Sonic,
Yes, sir.
and that's when he said that his dad asked if he wanted to see his mom.
Yes, sir.
Right. Was your understanding that was because he just recently had a birthday party?
I
He
didn't know
recently
anything.
had a birthday.
I didn't know anything about a birthday or a birthday
Okay.
party.
And then he at first had not mentioned the church
Correct.
visit, and you
Correct.
learned that from, and you came back and asked him about that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then he went to Lake Glad.
Yes, sir.
Your conversation with him was within a few hours of this happening?
I believe I arrived around 10 o'clock, and shortly thereafter, I began to talk to him in the vehicle. Yes, sir.
Okay, you started talking to the vehicle, and you had the longer conversation in the police station.
Yes, sir, downtown.
How much longer was that?
I believe we began that conversation around 12:20 in the morning until about 12:50.
Okay, so late at night, and he had already talked to another social worker before he talked to you?
Yes, sir, he did.
All right. And at the time you interviewed him, you knew some of the second time, you knew some of the facts, knew some of the events, a general idea about what had happened in the house. Is that correct?
I knew some of the facts. I never entered the house, so I didn't know anything specific within other than the grandparents were deceased and his mother was transported.
But you knew almost nothing about the family history beforehand. Is that correct?
No, I knew nothing about the family history prior to speaking to him.
About the custody situation.
No, other than what he told me, I didn't know anything
Okay.
about the family.
And you didn't know at that point when you were questioning him about what importance that may or may not have at that time.
Correct. I was just gathering information from him.
If I may have a second.
Yes. Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. You said that JT reported to you that he was in shock and felt numb when you were speaking with him. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And again, that was just a couple hours after this event.
Yes, sir.
Correct. And it sounds like you asked him on several occasions about his father's demeanor. Did he ever mention anything to you about his father being intoxicated or anything of that nature?
It never came up in the conversation. So he did
That's
not.
something you would have taken note of,
Yeah.
however.
Yes, sir, I would have.
And JT also, I guess, you had to follow up with him because there was some information you received that he hadn't offered up initially, correct?
Correct.
About being at the church, for instance.
Yes, sir.
And once you had heard that fact and presented it to him, He then said yes, and he recalled it.
Yes, sir, he did.
Okay. But there was no indication to you that he was attempting to withhold that information from you at all, was there?
No, sir.
All right, it's just purely a function of him remembering. At that
Yes, sir.
point. Okay. All right, thank you. Nothing further.
Recross.
No, sir.
Thank you, sir. Just step down. Further evidence for the state?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the state would call Dr. Lori Lilly to the stand.
I solemnly swear the testimony you give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Wiley?
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Lilly, good morning to you, ma'am.
Good morning.
Will you please state your name for the record?
Lori Lilly,
And how do you spell your last name, ma'am?
Lilley,
And I've called you Dr. Lilly. Where are you employed?
Wake Med,
How long have you been at Wake Med?
20 years.
And what is your general field of expertise, doctor?
General surgery and trauma.
And can you tell us a little bit about what types of cases you work in the general surgery and trauma field?
We take care of motor vehicle accidents, falls, all kinds of trauma, gunshot wounds, stab wounds. And we also do general surgery, like if you get appendicitis or cholecystitis, we take care of that, colon cancer, things of that nature.
And how are patients brought to your attention, ma'am?
The traumas are usually by EMS.
And back on April 9th April 9th and April 10th of 2014, were you a duly licensed physician here in North Carolina?
Yes,
And do you still maintain your physician's license here today, or medical license today?
yes.
Let me ask you a little bit about your background, Dr. Lilly. Can you tell us about your med school and then residency training?
Sure, I went to med school at Chapel Hill, and then I started out in internal medicine, went to Vanderbilt for a year, but switched to surgery and came back to UNC and went through a 5-year surgery residency there. And then I came to Raleigh for a job.
So straight from UNC to Wake Med?
Yes.
And did you have to do any kind of specialized training to be in the trauma field of surgery as well?
We were trained in trauma during our residency.
During the course of your career, Dr. Lilly, could you approximate how many gunshot wounds that you've taken care of since you've been at Wake Med?
Wow.
Doesn't have to be
Hundreds.
Hundreds. And I'm sorry, when did you say you started there?
1996.
96. Okay. Dr. Lilly, I want to thank you, ma'am. Dr. Lilly, I want to turn your attention to the early morning hours of April 10th of 2014. Were you on call or on shift as a general surgeon that night?
Yes.
Okay. Where were you? Did you have to be called in? Were you at the hospital? Kind of tell us a little bit about your location.
We stay at the hospital the whole time we're on call because when there's a trauma, we have to be there quickly.
And on that night, ma'am, did you have the opportunity to meet the victim in this case, Miss Latanya? She's now Allen Latanya.
Yes.
About what time did you first come into contact with her?
I think it was around 10:30
A.M. or P.M.?
p.m.
10:30 p.m. Okay, so that would have been April 9th, around 10:30 p.m. And for kind of record-keeping purposes, did you know her as Latanya Holden at that time, or was she given an alias?
She was given an alias initially.
And what was that alias?
I
If you recall.
can't remember right this second.
Is it Tina Truffle?
Tina Truffle, that was it.
And why does Wake Med sometimes assign aliases to different patients?
To protect the patient, because we never know if someone is going to try to come in and hurt them further or something.
And Dr. Lilly, tell us a little bit about how you got involved in Latanya's case.
Well, a trauma 1 was called, which a trauma 1 is the trauma patient that's hurt the most significantly as opposed to a trauma alert. And usually, we'll know within 10 or 15 minutes that someone's coming, and the trauma team will be in the trauma room. And the trauma team has the ER doctor, and the ER doctor is usually the one responsible for the airway. It has me, and I'm kind of the trauma team leader. We have a lot of nurses. We have a respiratory therapist. We have senior residents that are on our service. And everybody's in there to take care of the patient and give them the best care that we can.
And is Wake Med is it a trauma
It's a
center?
level 1 trauma center.
Level 1. And what happens when a patient arrives to you?
Well, EMS brings the patient in, and they give a quick report, and they've sort of given a cursory report on the radio beforehand. And they put the patient on the table, and we start assessing the patient.
So EMS gives you a general overview of what to expect.
Yes.
And is that pretty standard in all gunshot wound cases or any trauma case that comes in?
Yes, sir.
Does EMS actually help with the treatment at that point, or do they deliver?
Usually they turn it over to us.
All right. And what condition was LaTanya brought to you that night, or how was she when you first saw her?
It was clear that she was critically injured. She didn't have a normal sensorium. She had some evidence of trauma on her face and head. So, part of her mental status we knew could be attributed to assault or gunshot to the head. But also we were worried that she had an obvious bullet in her hole in her chest, and that she was not getting good tissue perfusion or good blood flow because she could be losing a lot of blood, which is called shock. Like she could be entering shock, and that could make her not be thinking and talking clearly. And it was also seemed like she couldn't really talk well because her mouth was hurt and it was injured. But she was somewhat combative, and she tried to sit up. And the only thing I really remember her saying was, I can't breathe, and then she vomited blood.
And before we get too much into her treatment, Dr. Lilly, were you one of the primary physicians that took care of LaTanya on the night in question, then also followed up with her?
Yes, sir.
And have you reviewed your notes in this case and prepared to describe her treatment here to the members of the jury?
Well, she was clearly in respiratory distress, and she had a hole just medial to her nipple, close to the nipple line level. So clearly we were worried about her heart, her lungs, major vasculature. And when bullets go in the left chest, one of the main things they do is collapse lungs. And
let me interrupt you just briefly. So you've reviewed her notes and you're prepared to testify as your treatment of her. Is that correct?
yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Your Honor, at this time I would ask to tender Dr. Lilly and as an expert in the field of general surgery and trauma surgery.
Any objection? No, sir. Her testimony will be received as proffered. Go ahead, sir.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's fine.
Just had to do an administrative thing there for us.
We-
Okay.
We kind of think simply, and we say airway, breathing, circulation, and she had a pretty good blood pressure, but her heart rate was really fast. It was like 149, and she was having trouble breathing. So one of the first things on our agenda was getting her good breathing, which would be putting a breathing tube in. And she was clearly very uncomfortable. And the good thing about a trauma team is you have a lot of people that can really be doing things at once. So we sort of, in a matter of minutes, intubated her, which is put her on a breathing machine, put a left chest tube in, so if there was blood or air, it could come out. And some blood did come out, though not huge quantities. And we put big IV lines in her groins to be able to give her fluids. We gave her a couple of liters of saline. She still had a pretty rapid heart rate. We started blood at that time and got a chest x-ray, which did not show a bullet in her chest.
How much pain was LaTanya in at the point where you first saw her and first began your procedures?
I think she was in pain. And EMS had said she had complained, I can't breathe, and she had complained of her left flank hurting, and her left flank posterior back also had a hole from a bullet shot.
And let me ask you about that. You said that you ordered a chest x-ray. What were the different purposes for you to order an x-ray of LaTanya at that point?
To make sure her lung was up, and we already had a chest tube in, and that was up, to make sure there wasn't a huge quantity of blood in her chest. That was basically evacuated, to look for a bullet and see where it was, to make sure our ET tube from putting the breathing machine, on her was in a correct position and that sort of thing.
You mentioned bullet on the x-ray and in your examination of her. At this point, were you able to see if Latanya still had a bullet in her at that point?
We did not see a bullet on the x-ray.
And at this point, just talking about your exterior examination of Latanya, did it appear to be an entry wound and an exit wound on her?
That's what we thought, that it was an entry wound, medial to her nipple, and maybe an exit on her back. And she also had an area on her left mouth that we thought was probably from a bullet. And she had some stuff on her face, swelling on the right side. She had chipped teeth on the right side. And we weren't quite sure if that was bullet or assault or what at that point.
And in terms of prior to opening Latanya up and doing this exploration inside of her, just in regards to the exterior, the outside of her body, how much blood was present? Was she actively bleeding outside of her body?
There was really no blood coming out of the bullet holes at that point.
How about her face area?
I think there was some blood there, some blood in her mouth, and obviously on her body from where she had bled.
And I think when I kind of stopped you there, you were talking about the ABCs, and that's what are the ABCs?
Airway, breathing, circulation. So we had an airway, and we were breathing for her. And at that point, her blood pressure was good. If her blood pressure had been bad, we would have gone straight to the OR. But her blood pressure was good. Her pulse had responded nicely to our fluid and blood. And we decided at that point to get a quick CT to help us basically see the trajectory of the bullet and the injuries and to scan her head at the same time.
Is that in the...
Sorry.
Yeah, if you can slow down just a little bit for us so Madam Court Reporter can catch up. So you did the CT after the x-ray?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And at this point, Dr. Lilly, who else is involved in the trauma team in terms of people that you have there in the OR with you?
Well, once we saw the CT scan, there appeared to be some blood around her heart, and we immediately called the cardiac surgeon.
Who was the cardiac surgeon in this case?
Bolton, Dr. Bolton.
And who else was present?
Anesthesia, when we got to the OR, was present. And us. ENT was not involved at that point.
And ENT would be ear, nose, and throat?
Yes.
And would they have been called in for the facial wounds that you've described?
Well, we were taking care of the life-threatening things first because we certainly didn't want her to bleed to death. So once we got that taken care of, then ENT repaired the lip and did further scans to do what they needed to her face.
And Dr. Lilly, we oftentimes hear different levels of patients in terms of critical or stable and whatnot. How would you characterize Latanya's kind of condition at the point before you opened her up?
We always had a good blood pressure, and her pulse had responded to our fluids, but we knew that she was hurt badly, and that's why we were sort of moving quickly.
And what indications at that point did you have that she was hurt badly?
Well, we had to give her blood, and we saw the path of the bullet. And the CAT scan showed us that the bullet went in about the third level rib, and the bullet went in her subcutaneous tissue. It went in her chest. It went through the sac around your heart, which is called the pericardium. And we couldn't really tell from the CT scan what other damage it had done in that area, but we saw blood. And then we saw that it had gone through the liver. So that means it went through the muscle between the heart and the liver, the diaphragm. And it had basically blown apart the left lobe of her liver. And we saw a kidney injury on the CAT scan of the left kidney. And we saw a fracture of the 12th thoracic transverse process, which is a little bone that sticks out on the outside of the main vertebral body. And then the bullet had exited. So there was no bullet left in the trajectory of this.
And the 12th, what was that last?
Transverse process.
Is that essentially on your backbone?
Part of her backbone.
And you mentioned you had to give Latanya blood at this point. Could you tell at this point how much blood she had lost?
Well, by then the blood that we had sent, the levels we had sent in the trauma room had come back, and she had probably lost a third of her blood volume.
All right. Now, after examining the CT scan, is that the point where you decided it was?
We went straight to the OR.
Go in.
And Dr. Bolton came in, but we had already opened her abdomen, and we saw that, her liver was, the left lobe of the liver was injured, and the bullet had then skived her stomach, which was bleeding, and I think we did put some quick stitches in that. And then Dr. Bolton got there, and we knew that the bullet, we saw where it went through the diaphragm, right in the area of the heart, and he stepped right in and did a sternotomy. And at that point, her blood pressure was a little teeny bit more unstable. It was starting to become more unstable.
All right, let me back you up just a little bit. So y'all get her in the OR, and then you open her up for an internal examination. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and tell us a little bit, how do you go about doing this type of surgery on someone where you need to go inside and look at their full chest cavity?
Well, first we did an exploratory laparotomy where we made an incision from the bottom of the chest the whole way down the abdomen. And we sutured off that bleeder from the stomach, but packed the liver so it wouldn't bleed. And then when Dr. Bolton came in, we took a sternal saw and opened up her sternum.
And when you say you had to suture the stomach, what was going on there? What did you see?
It looked like a bullet had just scaved a hole right in the front anterior wall of it.
And when you say scab, does that mean it nicked it, or did
No, it went through it.
complete penetration?
Yeah, and it was not anterior posterior. It was just the anterior wall, and it made me think that maybe just the way she was crouched, for the path of the bullet, it kind of went down the anterior wall of it. And it also looked like when we got in the chest that it had gone through the pericardium and partially disrupted the muscle wall of the right ventricle.
So the pericardium, is that the sac around the heart?
Yes, sir.
And is that the area that Dr. Bolton he repaired?
Well, yes, and the main thing he repaired was the ventricle, because if that had not been repaired, that would have been a problem for later because it would have been a weak piece of wall.
So you get in there and you patch the hole in the stomach first. Excuse me. And was that the hole in the stomach? Was that an active bleed at that time?
It was bleeding some, but the liver had basically stopped bleeding, but there was a lot of hematoma in the abdomen.
So the liver. Tell us a little bit about the injury you saw there to the liver.
The left lobe of the liver was pretty much blown. The lateral two segments were pretty much blown off. And it was not really actively bleeding, so we didn't have to formally resect anything more or anything like that.
Do you have to, by formally resect, did you have to do any repair work to the liver, or is that something that heals on its own?
It heals on its own. We probably cauterized some things and left drains in so that if there was any bile draining, it would drain it out.
So you took care of the hole in the stomach, and you saw the liver injury, and then Dr. Bolton took care of the heart aspect. Is that right?
Yes. So he repaired the heart and he repaired the hole in the diaphragm.
What else did you see while you were in doing the exploratory surgery?
We didn't have to repair. She had, injured her kidney, but we didn't have to do any repair to that. We didn't have to do anything in her back.
You mentioned the back part of the backbone being fractured. Did you have to do any repair work to that?
No.
So the two main repairs that you had to do, you and your team, were the stomach repair and the heart repair.
Yes.
And have the diaphragm repairs.
And that too.
Okay, so the three different things there.
And we left a chest tube in. I think Dr. Bolton left a tube in the area around her heart, and I left drains in by her liver so that, like I said, if any bile drained, we would drain it while it was sealing off.
Now, you mentioned in reviewing the CT scan that you were generally able to tell the path of the bullet. Once you got in and were doing the interior, the examination, could you tell us a little bit more about the path of the bullet at that point, once you got inside the body?
Yeah, it was like the CT showed. It had gone, by the ribs, into the chest, anterior wall of the heart, anterior stomach, and then it had gone backwards and just by the way she was bent and gone over the top of her kidney and at the top third of her kidney and then out the back. And fortunately, it was lateral to where your spinal cord is.
So it sounds like that bullet hit several different organs in her body.
Yes.
Through the path.
And for her to have injured part of a heart wall and not through the heart wall was pretty miraculous.
Now, Dr. Lilly, any other treatment that you had to do to LaTanya while you had her there in the OR?
I don't think we did anything else. We took her back to the unit, intubated. She was still on the ventilator. And then ENT repaired her lip. and they got additional scans, and that's when we kind of saw that she had what we call an alveolar ridge fracture on the right side of her face, and I'm thinking that was probably from assault, and a couple of teeth were fractured, and they took her back the following day to fix that when she was more stable.
And you mentioned that, injuries that appear to be consistent with the assault. When you were doing your examination of LaTanya and doing these surgical procedures, did you see injuries that were consistent both with a GSW or gunshot wound and also
I think so, yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, there was a hole in the lower side of her mouth, cheek, lip area, and we think that was from a bullet, but she had swelling on the right side of her face, and that was sort of in the area where she had the fracture that they repaired, and I would think that was more than likely from the assault.
How about on her chest area? Did you see injuries both consistent with the gunshot wound and also a beating?
I really only remember the bullet hole.
Okay. So the face, you saw both types of injuries. Chest, more just the bullet hole. Dr. Lilly, after you did these, well, let me ask you one more thing about the interior surgery. How much blood would you say that she lost once you were inside?
Once we were in the OR, she really didn't lose a lot.
Okay. And I think you testified earlier that she lost about a third of her blood total.
I think so.
Just in how much is that, Dr. Lilly? Is that
She probably lost over 1,500 cc's.
And then during the surgery itself, I think you said that her blood pressure began to drop.
But she was never in a dangerous situation in the OR.
Okay. Y'all always had her, I guess, term maybe we hear as a fairly stable condition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, after the surgery is complete and after ENT gets involved, are you assigned to be her physician throughout her stay there at the hospital?
Well, I followed her the whole time, but when we have our patients in the ICU attending also follows them.
And did she have any complications from the surgeries while she was still there in ICU?
No. And we put her on food in her vein because we wanted her mouth to heal and stuff. And she moved out of the ICU in several days to the floor.
And when you say the floor, is that just
The surgery floor.
General surgery floor?
And at that time, she still had a chest tube and she still had drains around her liver.
And so she was admitted to your care on April 9th of 2014. Do you have noted as to when she was discharged?
She stayed 8 days, and she was very determined to get out to go to her parents' funeral. And she was only on a regular diet probably 2 days or less when the funeral occurred. And when we pull out a chest tube, we typically pull out the tube and we get a chest x-ray 6 hours later to make sure that there's no recollection of air or anything. And she really wanted to go to her parents' funeral, so we pulled out her chest tube at 4 a.m. I specifically remember this. Got a chest x-ray at 10 and it looked okay. And she left the hospital in a wheelchair with her liver drains in, because her parents' funeral, I think, was at 12 that day. And I remember thinking that I couldn't even believe she was doing that.
You mentioned kind of a miraculous earlier. Would you say her recovery was fairly miraculous as well in terms of how well she did once she...
I think she's a strong woman.
And after she was discharged that day, Dr. Lilly, did you have any other follow-up recovery appointments with her?
She came to the office a couple of times.
Anything abnormal happen in any of those visits?
No, sir.
Healing normally as you would hope for a patient to heal?
Yes.
If I may have just a moment, Sean.
Yes, sir.
Questions at this time, Sean?
Thanks.
Cross-examination.
Yes, sir. Dr. Lilly, just a couple clarification questions.
Okay.
You talked about the damage to several organs, including, I believe, the kidney, heart, and liver. That was all caused by a single bullet. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you talked about the injuries to the face. They were not considered life-threatening at the time?
No. not the facial injuries.
Not the facial injuries. And it appeared that some of the damage you thought that you saw on the face, injuries here and all, that was caused by, you believed, an assault?
Well, I felt like we were kind of a little bit perplexed the first night. We weren't sure if it was assault or bullet, and we thought the stuff on the left side looked like a bullet. And then when we found out she had probably been beaten too, it made sense for the right side.
Okay, so you went...
Because that was more of an assault on the right side, where
Okay,
she
so-
had the fracture. And there were no bullet fragments or anything like that.
No bullet fragments in that part of it at all?
No, sir.
And you speculated that it was probably, that there may have been a hole that may have been caused by a bullet, but you were not certain. Is that fair to say?
Well, it was like her lip cheek on the left side we thought was by the bullet.
Okay.
But this side, she had a fracture up here, and a couple of teeth were broken.
Okay.
But we don't think that was from the bullet.
You don't believe that was from the bullet?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Wallace?
No, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down. Further evidence for the state?
The state will call Deputy Edwards, Wake County Sheriff's Department.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Lively?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir. If you would, please just introduce yourself to the jury and if you tell them how you're employed.
Good morning. My name is Deputy J.R. Edwards with Wake County Sheriff's Office. I apologize. I have a little bit of laryngitis.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, we've
Sorry.
got water there for you, and if you can just pull the microphone up close to you, you won't have to speak as loud.
Sure.
Okay, is that better?
It's better.
All right. Deputy Edwards, how long have you been with the Wake County Sheriff's Department?
But 3 years and 2 months, sir.
Okay. And were you serving in your capacity, and have you been on patrol all that time?
Not the whole time, sir. I was doing a field training at that time.
Okay. All right, so you were actually a training officer on January 26th of 2014?
I was actually the person that was being trained, sir.
Okay. All right. And who was the officer that was training you?
Deputy Collado.
So when you're in training and you have a training officer, you had already gone through basic law enforcement training, and you were a sworn sheriff's deputy.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you were able to write reports, make arrests, do all the things a deputy did.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. But I guess because it was early in your tenure, you had someone to supervise with you and kind of train you how to respond to calls and write reports and things of that nature.
That's correct.
Well, let's talk about January 26th of 2014. Did you have any reason to go to 1125 Lake Glad Road here in Wake County that day?
I did, sir.
Okay, and can you tell me about the nature of that call, what time you received it, things of that nature?
It was on a Sunday, I believe. That was the first day of that training week, and received a call about a juvenile problem.
Okay. Now did you respond there on Sunday the 26th or Monday the 27th, or do you remember?
It was Sunday. It's a typo on the report.
Okay. All right. So it says in the report Monday, January 27th.
It does, and that was my mistake, sir.
Okay. You were training, right?
I was.
All right. That's fair enough. But you do recall it was January 26th at about 7:30 that evening.
If my memory serves me correctly, it was between 6:30 and 7 o'clock, somewhere around that.
Okay. But you do recall responding to Lake Glad Road, and you said in reference to a juvenile problem.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you tell me about what you did when you arrived on the scene, who you spoke to, things of that nature.
When we arrived to the address, the juvenile was actually outside, and got out of the vehicle, made contact with him. He had said that his phone was taken from him by his grandfather. So he was pretty upset about that, but we talked a little bit and kind of calmed him down, but it really wasn't as bad as I thought it was. You just never know when you go on a call like that. So he was disappointed and upset, rightfully so. But the call was that he had been struck. The first thing I did was look at his face to see if I could see any lacerations, redness, anything of that nature. Shine a light on the face. I didn't see anything. And so ruled that out. After talking with him a little bit about why he thought his phone was being taken, why his grandfather took his phone from him, he really didn't really say exactly why that was. But after speaking with him a few moments, we put him in a patrol car, and we drove to his house, his grandfather's house, and left him in the car. And I got out and spoke with the grandfather, and he did say he did take his phone. So.
And again, just to be clear, the juvenile you met with was Jeremy Taylor, or JT. Is that
JT, right? That's correct, sir.
And the grandfather was Mr. Sylvester Taylor you spoke to?
That is correct.
All right. Now you say you actually had to drive JT back to the house at Lake Glad Road. Where did you actually come into contact with him?
I can't remember the address. If I can look at my report, I can.
Sure.
It was 2 locations. It was on Lake Glad Road is where I encountered JT, and then we left from there and went to the address where his grandfather was, and I don't have that in front of me.
Now, his grandfather's address is 1125 Lake Glad, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And where on Lake Glad Road did you come into contact with Jeremy?
It was actually outside, not actually in the house.
Okay. Did you receive calls from both the grandfather and the grandson, or was it just from the grandson? Or
No, I didn't receive a call from the grandfather or the grandson. The call came in through our operations center, and then we responded to that location.
And you said that Mr. Taylor said that he did admit to taking the phone, but not to hitting JT?
That's correct.
Okay. And, you've investigated it, you've seen no evidence of physical injury or anything like that. What did you do to kind of diffuse or resolve that situation?
Well, it really wasn't that really much to really diffuse. After just talking with him, just kind of, hey, what do you think the reason why he took his phone? And he said, well, my grandfather was upset about him using the phone, I guess excessively. And being that I had a teenager of my own and used to talking with him, if you're a parent, you kind of do the thing, little psychology, just say, hey, it's not that bad. You're going to get your phone back. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Simple things like that. And on the ride there, he pretty much kind of calmed down a little bit. So he wasn't really too agitated, but he really wanted his phone back. So he took.
And when you talk, so you kind of, Jeremy, or JT calmed down while you were talking to him and wasn't as agitated anymore?
He did.
And in talking to the grandfather, Mr. Taylor, was he, do you remember if he was particularly agitated or if he was polite and cooperative with you or what?
He was polite and cooperative. He was just upset that we were out there. Of course, I had my field trainer also with me. He was standing with JT at the car. I was talking with the grandfather and just basically asking him, what happened? How did this turn of events start? And he tried to explain it, but at the same time, he was just a little agitated. But once I got talking to him, he calmed down as well. And I basically told him that he's going to be, actually, if I can back up just for a minute, I did speak with his mother on the phone. I have her number in my little notepad.
Yes, sir.
And I explained to her that he was fine, no injuries or anything of that nature before I talked to the grandfather. And when I talked to the grandfather, he said that he was going to eventually give him his phone back. But I made sure when they went in the house that they was separated, that JT go to his room and his grandfather just go into a different room and just let everything just kind of diffuse a little bit.
All right. But no charges were filed as a result of this call. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
All right. And after speaking with both JT and Sylvester Taylor, y'all left and left them both on the scene. Is that correct?
We did.
Did you have any concern for the safety of the juvenile when you left him there with his grandfather?
No, I didn't. After the last few words with his grandfather, I had a good feeling about it, that they were just going to just kind of stay apart for a while and just let everything cool down. And that was the emphasis that I left them both with.
Sure. And did you ever have to be called out to this residence again for a dispute between the grandfather and JT?
No, sir, we did not.
And when JT was speaking with you, or during this whole call, was there ever the mention of the grandfather displaying a gun or possessing a gun or making a threat with a gun?
No, he did not.
And that was never raised either in a call or in any statement that was given to you, is that right?
That's right.
Okay. And you spoke to the mother, that's Latanya Allen, on the phone, is that right?
I did.
Was she even present at the residence?
No, she wasn't. She was at work.
But she was advised about the situation, and after that you spoke to Mr. Taylor and then felt comfortable leaving them both there at Lake Glad.
I did, and I assured her that I felt comfortable leaving JT in that situation because it calmed down drastically. So, and she shouldn't have to worry, but we were going to be close by in the area patrolling, and if anything did occur, that we would be right back there relatively quickly.
Right. But you never had to go back there for any reason?
No, I did not.
All right. Thank you very much, Deputy Edwards. Nothing further.
Yes, sir.
Cross-examination.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Deputy Edwards.
Morning.
So your understanding was that you were traveling to Lake Glad Road because a call had been placed, correct?
That's correct.
That would have been a call to 911?
It was a call from 911 to our operations center that dispatched us to that location.
Okay, and then 911 dispatches an officer to the scene, is that right?
That's correct.
And the call, your understanding, you before you travel to the scene, you have some understanding of what the call was to 911, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in this case, you said that the original call to 911 was that a juvenile had been slapped, is that right?
No, it didn't come out as a juvenile been slapped. The call came out just juvenile problem, which basically could mean a lot of things, but there was indication of no weapons or anything of that nature, or no one hurt.
Didn't you say in your direct examination that your initial understanding was that someone had been struck?
No, that was after I got there.
I see. So, okay, I think I misunderstood.
That's okay.
So you arrived and you spoke with someone you know now as Jeremy Taylor, is that right?
That's correct.
And he informed you that he had been slapped?
He said he had been hit, so I checked to see if I could see any initial gashes, bruises, things of that nature, and I did not.
Okay.
And I shined the light on his face, and that's standard in anything to somebody that says they've been assaulted, to see if they actually have been, because it was dark outside, completely pitch black. So I shined the light on the side of his face where he said he was hit, but I didn't see any laceration or bruise of that nature at all.
Okay. But he said he'd been slapped.
He did.
And Jeremy was, at the point you spoke with him, he was far enough away from the Lake Glad residence that you needed to drive him there?
He was at another residence where he made the call because he didn't have his cell phone with him. I don't want to assume. I'm just going to say maybe he went to a friend's house or another relative and then made the call. I responded to that location, and then his grandfather was at the Lake Glad location.
I see. So when you met him, he was outside of a different residence,
He was.
and that residence was far enough away from that you had to drive to get to his grandfather's residence.
It wasn't that far, but yes, we had to drive.
Okay. Hold on just a second. Sorry about that little pause.
That's all
You said that when you arrived at the Lake Glad residence, at the grandfather's residence,
Yeah,
you found the grandfather
I did.
at that point. Was he inside the house?
No, he wasn't. He was outside.
Okay. And you said that he was agitated. Is that right?
A little bit, yes.
And you decided to make that the best thing was for the grandfather and JT to stay away from each other for the rest of the evening?
That's correct.
And that's what you asked them to do, right?
I did.
Okay. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge.
Ladies and until 25 minutes till 12. Please recall all the instructions I've given you. Leave your notepads in your chairs.